You've always been a champion of Canadian music, which I think is really dope.
There's this complex, and it's not just rap, it's a Canadian thing in general with our own artists. We don't appreciate ourselves, and we don't like our stuff as much as the American stuff, and we feel like we're inferior. And I think that extends to being like, we don't want to appear to be Canadian. We don't want to seem too Canadian. We don't want to be like, because it's like you couldn't make it in the States or something. Like like I intentionally want to be in Canada.
Hey, boys in the borough, boys, always in the motherfucking borough. No, we keep it thorough. No, see me on the streets, don't be asking for a borough. Hey, no running back. We on the road, that's a fact. Came to the bottom, no going back. See me in the club, keep the seats, we got my.
First of all, thanks for coming through, man. I appreciate you coming to the crib, and I haven't seen you, I think, since maybe Strombo's crib.
Yeah.
Might have been the last time I seen you. I've seen you a lot actually through the years with Strombo. I remember when you performed at GST, George Stroumboulopoulos Tonight. Yeah. I've seen you at House of Strombo. These are actually panels from George Stroumboulopoulos Tonight.
Oh, that's dope.
So we brought these back. Had to bless the interview show.
You're like, this is your Strombo's house.
Yes, exactly. The miniature version.
Yeah.
But congrats on the new album, man. I got a chance to take it in. It's pretty dope. I really like it. I think it's different.
Thank you.
As always, it's quite different. It's quite different than what's out there. Mm-hmm. And when I think about you as like a multidisciplinary kind of creative, I don't even know how you navigate it, man. Like you're a author, right? Rapper, DJ, producer. Like you do all these things, and at the same time, you still have time to put out music.
Yeah.
How do you do it? And
I'm also a parent now.
And a parent, and you're married.
Yeah, I'm married. Yeah.
Right? How do you do it, man?
For me, it just comes naturally. Yeah, I've always kind of been like this, even when I was a young kid. Like I was interested in every aspect of creativity, and I realized now you call it a creative, or you like call it like a multidisciplinary artist, but that was just how I always was. Like I was interested. I was like drawing and like doing like art stuff, and I was like acting in high school, and I was really just interested in just everything that was around art. And nowadays, it's just like the way I split it up is, for instance, like I'm doing a record now and I'm in album mode fully, but then there'll be some days that are more like administrative. There'll be other days where it's like, okay, like I'm recording today, or like other days where it's like more setting up for the future or whatever, or like, oh, it's touring, I gotta be playing shows, I gotta rehearse. Right. Like it's like I split it up. I'll know what it is when it's the week of it, Right. Tell me about the new album. I got a chance to take it in. Obviously, it has a huge tech theme to it. Lots of technology vibes in there. What made you want to dedicate an entire album to this theme? Well, I've been interested in technology for a while, and I had these themes a little bit on Parallel World with songs like On Me, Connect, and I just noticed technology is very omnipresent in our lives, and it's becoming increasingly so. And I just noticed, even just for myself as an artist, it's gotten way more difficult to reach an audience online, way harder to get people to like actually hear your music. It's funny, these tools were supposed to make everything better. They were supposed to make things more optimized. And now I feel like it's worse than it was back when it was like dial-up internet. Because even back then, it was like I was very early on the internet, right? And putting your music on the internet. I was and making music with a computer. Like I remember when I first did it, people thought I was crazy. They were like, "How are you going to play a show when you're going to bring a desktop computer on stage?" People just didn't get it, right? Even like in rap, like because it was so hardware oriented, it was like drum machines and stuff, and I was making beats on my computer, and it was just totally off the wall. But yeah, since those times, back then, it just felt like it was just the Wild West, and you could do anything. Like I was like sending my stuff to labels. I was built this crazy fan base of people all around the world just off of like message boards and forums and stuff. Right. But now it feels like every social media platform, they try to tell you it's going to be good for you. It's like you're going to have access to all these people and you're going to connect and all this, but it's like only if you pay.
Right.
You got to pay for ads. You got to do what we want you to do.
Right.
And so that kind of dichotomy is what really inspired me to make the record all about technology.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think even when you go on social media, you're scrolling through, it feels like there's a new piece of AI that's always evolving. That's like I'm maybe it's also my algorithm, because I look at a lot of this stuff, but I'm always like, oh, there's a new app that does this. There's, and just the tech seems to be advancing so quickly, right?
Do you notice though with the AI, whenever they come out with the new AI, it's never like, oh, we figured out an AI to solve homelessness. Yeah. Or, we figured out the AI that's going to like help everybody with housing and blah, blah. It's always like, we figured out how to get rid of the artist and we can just make the music without the musician. Or now we know we can make films and music videos without even having a director. And it's always about extracting the artist from the art.
That's a good point.
Like I just find it kind of funny how it's always just like, yo, we've got this amazing technology. We can make Drake without having Drake here.
Why do you think that is? Do you think that there's an agenda to remove the creative from the creative process?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think with tech and a lot of businesses, their model is how can we get the most for the least money? And in this case, it's like, artists are difficult for these corporations. They don't like artists because we believe we should be paid for our labor.
Right.
And what they would prefer is if they could turn us all into kiosks, like at Shoppers, that just pump out content that they can use for free.
Of course.
Yeah.
Huh. Why do you think that we'll get to the point where AI does start doing things that are more important than replacing the creative? Like you mentioned homelessness, you mentioned, there's famine, there's so many issues. Do you think that we'll begin to use AI for these more important issues?
Hopefully. But I mean, that was the thought when computer technology just started advancing, a few decades ago. People were like, what is it going to do? It's going to change society. It's going to save the world and everything. But really what it ended up being is just an easier way to sell products to people.
Right.
And that's it. That's the problem that I have with capitalism and stuff. Like, it's like, I'm in a capitalist society. I got to rock with it, and you got to engage with it whatever way you can. But it's inevitable whenever you put art and commerce in the same place and you try and put them together, it's inevitable that the art is corrupted. I find it, this is why I like it when the era of like mixtapes and stuff.
Right.
When it was just purely online, you're just putting something out, it's free, as many people can listen to it as they want. And it's not this thing of, okay, where's the profit margin? It's like, how many streams do you have? Like, all the numbers and stuff. The numbers, which I believe are just only visible to pit us against each other.
Right.
So I've got a lot of theories about all this tech stuff,
You talk about, like, I feel like, and even in your music, you talk about lots of interesting things, politics, you talk about social issues, but even right now, as you talk about capitalism, you, as an artist, as a creative, a lot of the times what it boils down to now is metrics, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, how much streams does this guy get, right? Mm-hmm. How appealing is he to the masses? How many followers does he have, right? You've been doing this for a long time. Mm-hmm. You're like an OG in the Canadian game. Does that stuff still matter to you, like reaching those metrics?
It's funny. I think I'd be lying if I said I didn't look at it and it wasn't on my mind, because the fact of the matter is you can't play certain festivals if you don't have X amount of monthly listeners, if you don't have X amount of followers.
Right.
That's what it's become, is people don't want to take a chance on something. If the music is great, if it's like great art, they're just like, how we need to get a return on this. So the chances, that era is over. It's everything they need is sure thing. And now these metrics can help them decide what they're going to do. But personally, I don't live my life like that at all. And I think that's what's given me longevity, actually, is I don't like break my back over like how many streams I'm going to get, or like, whatever, how many followers I have on stuff. Like, I don't really care. Like, it's
so
not
how does it
important.
impact you, like when you're conceptualizing and creating, an album like Roller Coaster, and you're like, I want to play festivals, I want to do certain things, I know metrics matter to a degree, I know that my following matters to a degree. Do you let that impact your creative process while you're creating a new album?
No, not at all. Like for me, it's really I just try and make the best thing I possibly can, and I know who I am as an artist. That's the other thing. Is like if I were to try and let me just make some like super commercially viable like pop music or whatever,
right,
it's gonna be whack as fuck, right, honestly, because it's gonna be obvious that it's not coming from who I really am. I think the thing that resonates with people about what I do is it's truly like coming from an original source, and it's one of a kind, and it's my voice, and it's my perspective. You know, and I think I think younger artists are maybe reluctant to do this. I notice like sometimes I'll do things for like factor grants and stuff where I'll be like voting on, you know, judging the people.
Right.
And I've seen the difference in what it is, what it used to be like and what it is now. It used to be people like, what are your goals as an artist and stuff? They're like, oh yeah, I want to play like I want to play this festival, you know, like I want to sell this many records, or like I want to collaborate with these people or whatever, right? Nowadays, it's just like, I want to get this many followers on TikTok. I want to get, you know, this many streams. The industry has totally reoriented the way that all the artists and the listeners engage with the art, which is what I have a big problem with, and it's what I talk about in this record a lot.
Yeah,
is they, you know, a lot of the streaming companies, they have devalued music. They've made it so this beautiful, precious art form that we make, everyone expects it for free. When, you know, your life is less valuable when you don't have music in it. You ever notice you go to a restaurant and they're not playing music, and it just feels like
the experience is off.
Feels weird, right?
Yeah.
But it's like, oh, but that's not valuable, right?
How do you think that we as a society, because this is the thing, I almost feel like it's with every technology that's introduced, the minute it's introduced, people initially want to fight it. There's some kind of, process on how long it takes for it to become mainstream, but it eventually always does become mainstream. How do you foresee like a healthy balance between, and do you think it actually will exist, a healthy balance between AI and, like you said, like now there's apps that will make music, make a song in the style of so and so, right? When it gets to that point where a client, like let's say, I don't know, Coca-Cola or whatever, any client would have spent X amount of dollars on bringing on artists to create a jingle or do something for them, and now they're like, well, we're just going to use AI, right? In the style of,
they will do that.
They probably already started doing that.
That's their plan.
So let's say, you know, any brand, I'm not going to say Coca-Cola, any brand is like, make a song in the style of Cadence Weapon.
It's already happened. Somebody ripped off my song and
what song was
the
this?
Uber Eats commercial.
What?
Yeah, I have a song, Connor McDavid, and it's a hockey player.
Okay.
For the Oilers.
Okay.
And it was a very popular song, and it still is. Like whenever they're in the playoffs, it goes crazy. And I know what happened. Obviously, there's a fake version of my song. They made it in a drill style, and it's like for Matthews.
Wow.
And it's exactly the same like vibe. It's obviously the brief that Uber gave them was like, can you make a song just like this guy's song?
But this is not AI. This is them. They actually took your concept and asked another creative to create it.
The next thing will be AI. They'll just do AI instead of getting the guy to do it.
Okay, well, going back to the actual scenario, that sucks. How did you handle it?
Oh, I just think it's funny. I don't care.
You don't care?
No, man. No, it's like when I say artistry is like they can follow the leader. They got to follow me where I go. It's like I don't run out of ideas.
Right.
It's like I have infinite creativity because I know who I am. So it's like I don't really care about like having my songs and commercials and stuff. It's cool when I get a song in a movie or whatever, like, and it's very helpful. Obviously, it's one of the best things, like money wise. But it's nothing I chase. I don't ever chase that kind of thing.
It's interesting because I feel like a lot of creatives in your position, whether it's music or any kind of art, when you're creating something and someone kind of steals it, they would want to get lawyers involved. It's intellectual property, blah blah blah, and that's not your approach. That's not something you'd want to do.
If I did that, I'd be spending all day doing that, because it's like it happens to me all the time. And the nature of music though is it's a cultural language. It's oral history is how we share ideas, and there's always going to be some crossover anyway.
Right.
So I'm not like super pressed about it. Like, I'm probably, when I made that song, I was inspired by like Lil Wayne doing like Kobe Bryant. Right? It's like we're part of a continuum here.
Right.
So I'm not gonna like, you know, go crazy about it and try to start suing people and stuff, because it happens to me a lot. Like, you know, I'm the kind of artist where I'll do something and then like in 5 years everyone else will be doing it.
I see that.
But like when I first started, it was like weird when I did it.
Yeah, I see that.
That's just like my whole thing, you know.
Mm-hmm. I see that. And it's funny that you mentioned that too, because one of the things that I just the other day I came across this old documentary that one of my university teachers, props, asked me to watch, and I just came across it and I just sat there and rewatched the whole thing. It's called Merchants of Cool. Have you seen it?
Heard of it? No.
So the Merchants of Cool, it's like an old 2009 documentary, and basically it talks about corporate America and how they go into high schools, they see who the cool kids are, analyze what they're wearing, how they speak, basically their demeanor. Then they go back to their offices, remake whatever clothing it is that they're wearing, and then just sell it back to them and sell it back to the masses. So when I think of artists like yourself, who you're always on the cutting edge because you are experimental. You're the guys that are trying new things, right? So of course, anyone who's looking at like, I wonder what direction we could go in. They might look at you and say, we should try this because, you know, it's not mainstream yet. He did it first, but it's not mainstream yet.
You know what I am? I'm mood board music. That's what it happens to me all the time. Like, people will tell me, you are on the mood board. I know I am.
Right.
Right?
And how do you feel about that?
No, because it's like, of course I am. I'm doing something very interesting, and I come up with these ideas, and people are always hard up for ideas. So it happens. It's okay. It's okay. Like, honestly, it just makes me feel like I'm doing something more significant every time it happens. It's good.
So how do you feel about, like, let's say artists, you know, the pioneers of Canadian hip hop, Maestro, Fresh West, Mishi, all of them, right?
Yeah.
And you think about, they were the first to do it. And if they would have done it a couple years later, decade later, they probably would have been the biggest thing, right? But because they were ahead of their time, you know, it took decades, and then someone like Drake comes, blows up the Canadian hip hop scene. But is there something to be said about being ahead of your time not necessarily working in your favor?
Yeah, I mean, it can be frustrating. I think I used to be a lot more frustrated with it when I was younger.
Right.
Because I felt like I just didn't really get the credit for what I was doing.
Right.
But I think as I get older, I realize that is the credit. Like, seeing your legacy impacting other people, younger artists. Like, there's definitely some young artists that I really like coming up in Canada, like Miss Milano and like Backwash and Cartel Madras, who are making rap, and it's a little bit different. It's a little bit off the wall, whatever. And I feel like I kind of created a lane that maybe made it easier for them to do what they're doing.
Right.
And that makes me really happy. And that's like, I think, its own reward. So, and I've met all the OGs. I know them all, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, I wanted to rap when I saw the Rascals and, you know, Cardinal on Much Music back when I was living in Edmonton. I was a kid. You know, it's like, that is that impact, that influence, that you can touch people across the country and inspire them to do something with their lives.
Right.
And then you meet that person later. I don't think there's anything really like better than that.
Yeah, I feel you.
I want to go back to what you were saying though before about the AI and like what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So my thing with technology right now is it's always like, we need to use the technology, but don't let it use us. That's how I feel. And that's how I feel with the AI. I feel like there are some creative applications potentially. Like, I think I read a thing with this artist, Holly Herndon, who she's really very tech savvy, like futuristic kind of artist. And she was talking about the idea of somebody coming through and being like, yo, I'm going to use Rolly's voice. I'm going to use Cadence's voice. I'm going to ask him if I can do something in the style of him and it'll be on my record, and I'll cut him in on the song.
Okay.
And so it's like you're doing a collab, but it's someone doing it as you. Like there's something interesting about that. There's like an interesting friction between like reality and perception with that I think is really cool. So I think there's potential. You know, I just saw the homie who's on the album Machine Drum.
Right.
He was using this. There's this new AI thing where you can put in prompts and it makes electronic music out of it.
Right.
And the stuff that he was posting, like I was like, this is crazy. This sounds like it's doing things like I think maybe the human hand can't actually create. Right. So when we're getting to a point where it's doing something that's going beyond what we thought was possible. Now we're talking. Now we're cooking with something. That's interesting.
That is interesting because you're utilizing it in a way where it's not ripping off or duplicating necessarily. It's more like, okay, now you're exploring something brand new, right? Now, going back to the thing that you said with, your friend using your voice.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I think that's cool, but I think the main difference there's consent.
Yes.
Right? She asked, can I use your voice? You said yes. And then she went ahead and used it.
Right.
So I think the troublesome factor here is AI and how we as a society are going to navigate through consent. I think that's a big issue.
We've already seen this happen, right, with the Drake and Weeknd thing.
Exactly.
And which I thought was just so whack on a bunch of different levels. Like it was just so. I think one of the best things I read about AI is Nick Cave, amazing artist,
right.
One of my favorite artists. He has a newsletter and he was talking. Somebody was saying like, I made a song in the style of Nick Cave with Chat GPT, made the lyrics and everything. What do you think about this? And he was like, I'm not threatened by this because it can only make something based on what I've done in the past. Right? It can't, I'm an artist. I have real experiences. My life experiences are what influence what I create. And the machine doesn't have experiences. So it's never going to like outpace human life. It can only be like a simulacrum of it.
Right.
So I'm not threatened by it personally. I just feel like there's some potential cool applications for it, but generally I just think it's so whack when like the Drake and Weeknd one where it was like this old version of the Drake's voice, the way he used to rap like 10 years ago. The Weeknd is like 15-year-old version of him, kind of. Right. It's just to me, it's like digital blackface too, right? Because it's not a black person's idea to be like,
that's interesting.
You know who we should exploit? Black artists. You know whose voice we should take? Drake. That's the first one we think of. It's never Taylor Swift. Why?
That's interesting.
Right?
Yeah, that's fascinating. I hadn't even thought about that, and you're right, because now people are able to appropriate in a different way that was never possible before, right? That's interesting. Speaking of Drake and Weeknd, what did you think of Drake's approach to using Pac's voice and all of that on the diss track?
I didn't like it personally. Like, I felt like it's weird when it's somebody who's died that you also don't have a personal connection to, and then you didn't get. Obviously, he was forced to take it down recently by the estate. Yeah,
the estate came after him. I think
I felt like it was kind of in poor taste, right? And also it's like, what happened to being an MC? You can't do an impression yourself. That used to be the thing. Like, there's all those like root songs that Black Thought will do everybody's style, and it's like you think it's cool G-rap or whatever. Like,
right.
That's artistry, right? Like, I feel like this, like the AI thing of like, oh, I'm gonna pretend to be this person's voice. Like, it's just like grotesque to me. It's like this mimicry that's just kind of feels bad. And it just, to me, it looks like it's getting to him. When you're pulling out all the stops, I'm going to use the AI. I'm using it. I think it was also because everyone was saying that his other disc was AI.
Right.
Right, and so it was kind of like trolling.
Yeah.
But I think it's a red flag when people hear your stuff and they can't tell if it's real or if it's AI.
Yeah. There's something to be said there.
Yeah.
I agree. I think when I initially heard the track, I thought, okay, this is what Drake does. Drake tries to do something cutting edge. He tries to beat people to, be the first to do something. So at first I was like, okay, kind of a cool approach. And then I sat with it. And as we were talking about consent, at my first go, very first time hearing it, I wasn't sure if he got consent. Did he talk to Snoop? Did Snoop allow him to do this? I don't know. So just at a first listen, I was like, cool, but like, I don't know any of the background details. I don't know any of the context of how it came to be. Then when you come out and you find out like the Pac estate is coming after him, I don't know if Snoop gave him permission. It's like, oh, okay, so he just went about it not the right way, So that tints in a negative way the approach. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It definitely doesn't hit the same.
It doesn't hit the same when
it
you
was
know
intentional and like
exactly
you went the right way about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think on that note, I wanted to ask you too. You mentioned it a little bit, using AI tools, and how are you finding your creative balance is changing with AI?
Yeah. I mean, I haven't been really using it.
Not at all?
No, I didn't use it on this record or anything.
You haven't used ChatGPT to help you with some ideas or anything?
You know what I did do?
Yeah.
I did, after the album was done, I fed all the lyrics into ChatGPT, and I was like, what do you think? I was like, what do you think this album's about, with the themes and stuff? And it came back with some actually really interesting observations that some stuff that I hadn't even intentionally done. Like it actually keyed in on some subconscious connections that I had made that I didn't even like realize that I made.
Interesting. Like what?
Like I have this song called Blue Screen on the album, and in the chorus it's crashing again, and it's about like technology and like the blue screen of death, like a computer crash, talking about like failing technology and stuff. But then it was like, but crashing again implies maybe like a decline of relationships and stuff too. And I was like, yeah, I guess so. I mean, that wasn't like my main thing, but I was like, yeah,
good observation.
Yeah, thanks, ChatGPT. Yeah, sure.
That's fascinating. Do you find that your fans have ever also done that, where people who listen to your music interpret it in a way where it's like, I didn't intend for it to be that, but it's cool that this person took it that way?
Always. And I think that's what music is about. Right. It's all about, you make it yourself. You have your interpretation of it. You have your intention of it. But as soon as you put it out, you lose ownership of it in a lot of ways. And it just goes out into the world, and people are going to interpret it in whatever way they want to. And sometimes you lose like total control over it. Then it becomes everybody else's song, and it doesn't mean as much to you anymore. Right. It's interesting.
Yeah. Tell me about the collabs on this album. I know Jacques Green is somebody that you've worked with before. He's your homie, right? Yeah. Tell me about that. Tell me about and all the other collabs on the album.
Yeah, for sure. Like, this album was cool because I got to get back in the studio with people. Yeah. Like, my last record was like earlier in the pandemic, so it was all virtual, like production and recording and sending stuff back and forth. So a lot of it started in LA. Like, I took a trip to LA like early 2022, and I just was there for a couple months. I got very inspired, and I was just posted up recording with people. And yeah, Jacques Green, like, me and him, we always make bangers, man. Like, it's just really fun to work with him. One of my closest friends, and I think we see music in a similar way. And like, when we work together, it's kind of like, I read this thing recently about Madvillain, about when they were making that record, and it would be like Madlib would be in the basement and MF Doom would be like upstairs, and then they wouldn't talk all day, but then Madlib would just come up with a beat, and then he would just write to it and give it back to him on a CD, and then that was how they communicated, was through the music. And that's a bit what it feels like with Jacques and I.
That's awesome, man. And you guys known each other from Montreal. That's where you guys first connected?
Yeah. Back, I lived in Montreal for like 6 years, and we used to DJ after parties and stuff together, and that was how I first got to know him. But we actually became like even closer friends when we both moved to Toronto. Yeah. Because he lived in Toronto for a while, and we were kind of like, it's just us. a little bit. Like we just like hung out a lot and commiserated about the problems that you have living in Toronto sometimes. So
right, we're gonna get back to the collabs, but just because we're talking about your journey of moving around, so you started in Edmonton, went to Montreal, then Toronto, now you're in Hamilton, right? How has, I feel like even just the way you moved around, you've really explored a lot of the Canadian scene. Have you ever thought about going south of the border? I feel like all Canadian artists have this dilemma where they're like, if I want to make it, I got to go to New York. I got to go to LA, Miami. Have you ever thought about that?
No, I have thought about that. Like my sister lives in New York and my dad is from New York. I have dual citizenship too. So it would be pretty easy. But I don't know. I feel like I still have so much like unfinished business in Canada and, you know, it's things I still want to achieve here. And like, I don't think I need to go somewhere else to be more successful. Like I feel like even just going to visit every now and then has been good. You know, I go to LA a few times a year, and you know I get a lot of work done when I do that. But yeah, I mean, I think one of the reasons my wife and I we moved to Hamilton a couple years ago, got a place there, and
why really, Hamilton?
I love Hamilton.
Why though? Like
it's really interesting, man. Like it's
what brought you out there initially?
I was always interested in Hamilton. Like we had talked about it a lot, and just as of the working class vibes, like. My wife is interesting. She really likes factories. Like she used to visit factories when she was a child, and she'd drive by and be like, "I want to see the factories and see like where all this stuff gets made," you know?
Right.
And so that kind of industrial, kind of gritty thing, like she's always been into that, and I feel that same way too. It reminds me a bit of being in Edmonton. To like the attitude, it's like a lot of DIY artists. All my friends are artists too. It feels like what Toronto used to be like maybe like 15, 20 years ago. Okay. Like it's still a little like rough around the edges, and it's not as many people. I like it a lot. Like I think we wanted to start a family too, and that was one of the big things, just having space for that. And now, you know, we got a backyard and I barbecue. I'm fully a dad. That's my vibe.
Nice, man. And so you have a son? Or daughter?
I have a son. Yes.
Okay, how old is your son?
My son is 6 months now. His name's Yari. And he's the best, man. He's my homie.
Do you feel like Yari is already musically inclined or artistically inclined?
No, not really.
No?
But I think that's okay. Like, I'm not going to really lay a heavy trip on him about trying to make music. I feel like, you know, he doesn't have to be like Sean Lennon or whatever. Like, you know, it's like, I would be really happy if he was a lawyer. Or just had like, just a stable occupation.
Well, I've heard you speak about your pops not wanting you to be a DJ because he was a DJ.
Yes, that's right.
So now are you embracing that same parenting method?
Yeah, I think so. And it totally backfired too. I ended up being a hardcore artist. Couldn't drag me away from it. I mean, it's, you know, it's if he has that draw to it that like we in our family always seem to. Right. I'll always help him and I'll guide him and hope he can learn from my mistakes and do even better than I did.
So if your son, if Yari says to you, know, he's a little bit older, he says, "Dad, I want to be a rapper." Yeah. You're down for it?
Sure, I will. Yeah. But I mean, I'm not gonna like push him necessarily to do that because it's just a hard life being an artist, right? And it's like when you have kids, you want them to have, you know, better life than you had, and you know, I had a really good life, and you know, I've basically, when you do what you love, you don't work a day in your life, right?
Absolutely.
That's what it feels like. Yeah. But I really just want him to have a certain security that I never had. And it was like, growing up with my parents too, it was like very frantic lifestyle growing up. And we were moving into different houses all the time. There's no stability. And I've always strived to have that now as an adult. Right. So I think it's probably connected to that.
Is that because your father was a DJ and your parents were creatives? Is that why there was a struggling artist kind of situation?
Well, it was like my dad was a DJ on college radio, so it wasn't like he was getting paid really to do it, and he would DJ parties and stuff, but it wasn't like the same as it is now. Okay. But he was really he had all kinds of like scams and hustles and stuff. He was just a hustler. He did like real estate stuff. He was selling weed. Right. That was his main thing.
By any means.
Yeah. So Yeah, it was like a very precarious life we had. My mom, she worked in like office jobs all the time and stuff, like secretarial stuff.
Right.
So, yeah, she was the one with like legit job. Yeah.
I want to take it back to collabs for a second, because I find that because of the style of music that you make too, I'm curious to know how you even come up with who you're going to collab with. I feel like I've heard you speak on artists also that you've known before they were even famous. Like I've heard you speak on Grimes, and I'm like, that's really interesting that you knew Grimes before she was the Grimes that people know today.
Yeah.
How do you choose who you're going to get into the studio with and want to create with, you know? And especially because you are around a lot of these creatives all the time. It seems like by chance, almost like you just are around these people all the time.
Yeah, it's a little bit crazy how some of the things like I've gotten to be around just by being there, but I think you create your own luck sometimes. And I think I would have been a really good A&R, because I just feel like I have a nose for when somebody's going to do something special soon. Like I always knew, being friends with Claire Grimes, like I knew she was going to blow.
Right.
And it's just weird. Like I can tell the difference between when somebody's just a good artist and when somebody's gonna like change things, right? And it was like, you see, walking around Montreal, like hanging out with her, like people would like stop and like point at her, and it's like she hadn't even put out any music yet.
Oh,
it was just off
interesting.
of her like look and her
Wow.
vibe. People were like, who is that? And then when she started making music, like people were like, oh my God, it's her.
Right.
Like it's like she could do no wrong. I was like, man, she could be like prime minister.
Wow.
You know, it's just she had the power. You know?
Have you guys ever done anything musically together?
Yeah, we did. She did a remix for me for my song "Conditioning."
That's right. Yeah, yeah.
And I did two remixes for her, for "Dark Heart" and another one of her songs, "A Crystal Ball."
Nice.
And we used to DJ together and stuff, and like hang out all the time. But it's like it's really funny just seeing all the like hubbub, people talking about her DJ set at Coachella.
Yeah.
And how she outsourced the BPMs to someone else or whatever. And I just was laughing. I didn't want to like really say anything about it, because it's like I know what happened personally. I know, like, Claire's really funny about performing, and always has been. Okay. And it's like I have a theory that she knew that what was gonna happen.
Right.
And it's like, I think she has a new album coming.
She played into it.
It was brilliant.
Yeah.
She's a genius. She's Machiavellian.
Even on the marketing level then too, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's all part of it. That's wow.
She knows what to do.
So what's going on with JPEG Mafia? I've heard you talk about wanting to collab, and it's almost happened. Has it happened?
No, it hasn't happened. And he's a cool guy. Like, we've hung out before and stuff, but it's like just hasn't happened yet. And I would love that to happen. And it's like I last saw him when he played at the Phoenix in Toronto. I gave him a copy of my book.
Nice.
And since then he's been doing all the Kanye stuff, and
that's right.
He's just on his own wave. I love his music, and I feel like he has kind of become the lord of the underground. You know, especially for like people who want to rap about different things and like rap over different kinds of beats and stuff. He like took it to a whole different level. So I just know like we'd make crazy track.
I think so too. I also got a chance. I've seen you perform live. I've seen him perform live, and his energy is wild. I think you guys would do some crazy stuff together. That'd be amazing.
He's an athlete for sure.
Yeah,
he's amazing.
Tell me about the other collabs on the album.
Yeah, so on the record, Machine Drum and I, we made a song together, My Computer, and that was the last single. Yeah, I love that track. I feel like it's really the centerpiece of the album. I feel like it's like the thesis of the album.
Got it.
But yeah, that song, Too Long Didn't Read, it's a meme. Wanted to end the album with a meme. And my joke about it was, I knew that because it's the last song, it was the least likely to be listened to on streaming. And so I was like, let me make this by far the most personal song that if anybody's really interested in what's going on in my life, like I could say it, all my feelings about this subject, everything, like I just like let it out. Like that was like me trying to do kind of like an Andre 3000 kind of stream of consciousness type track.
Yeah.
And I also think Harrison went crazy on that beat.
The beat's nice.
He really came through. He like I talked to him exactly about what I wanted. Like I wanted something organic, piano, and he came through with the crazy time signature too.
Right.
Like if you clock it, it's like I think it's like 7/4 or something, which was really fun to rap to because it was very unconventional. I'm always looking for things that are going to challenge me or push me in a different direction, and those are the artists that I find that I'll work with more frequently, is when people like take me into a different direction than I would take myself, you know.
Right.
That's not, like I work with KCMQ a lot. Like we've done a lot of stuff, and he always has a knack about bringing something more emotional. Like I feel like I want to sing when I'm on his tracks, and I want to like be more emotive, and
Right.
he kind of brings that out of me. So it was cool to work with him again. Lorraine James, amazing artist. She's like going crazy, really blowing up in the UK, and she's just one of a kind. Like there a lot of the producers I work with on this record and artists I work with, I realize like I feel like a certain kinship with them. I feel like a lot of like black artists who color outside the lines, and I feel like I wanted to bring them all together on one record, and it's like the X-Men. Like we're the mutants, we're the freaks, we're like the people who do different things, and Lorraine is like that. Like as soon as I heard her music, I was just like, we're gonna work together. I like need it. You know, like that's how I felt with her. Barty Strange, like I love his stuff, and I feel like he speaks the same musical language. Like I can identify people who I think we're speaking the same language musically, like pretty clearly.
Yeah, when I hear you speak about even the people that you get along with, the people you want to collaborate with, the way you kind of describe yourself as a mutant, I feel like people use the word weird to describe you a lot.
Yeah.
Is that something that you are constantly searching for, the weird, or is it just in you? Like, how do you describe your relationship with weird?
No, it's just me, man. I just can't help it. I can't be normal. I tried. I mean, it's what I think maybe what drew me to an artist's life is it's just, you know, I just don't think inside the box ever, and it works for me, and
Right.
I've had a good life from it, but it definitely, some people don't get it. I used to be more sensitive about it when I was younger. Like, you know, the first newspaper article I ever had, Edmonton Journal, like the headline was "Weirdness is his weapon." That's like the first thing. It's like, this is weird. It's weird. But I think the cool thing is, as time is going by, the rest of the world is starting to sound more like me, and they're moving more in my direction,
Right.
than I am moving in theirs. So it's like I feel like I'm onto something. I think the role of the artist is we gotta see the future before it's here. You know, we point the way for everyone else to be like, this is what things are gonna be like. You might not know it yet, but this is where we're going. And that's what I try and do with all my records, really, is just make connections that I'm not seeing other people talk about, or, you know, I interpret things in a way that maybe other people wouldn't think to do. And I feel like that's my role in music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you? I know a lot of your music also has like, so you talk about social issues, political issues. Does every piece of music that you make, do you approach it from a point of messaging, narrative? Is that always something that you strive for in your music?
Yeah, I really like to have like a pretty holistic experience with all my records, where there's like a consistent theme, especially the last few. I feel like it's a part of the art form, really, to have that kind of consistency, and like it. But it's interesting. It's like I won't know what it is maybe at first, but I'll see it kind of taking shape as I'm making it. That's kind of how I felt with this record. Like I didn't wake up one day and it's like be like, yo, I'm gonna make an album about technology or whatever. Like it was just, that was what I kept rapping about, and when I'd be freestyling and just come back to that and themes. And then I started thinking, it's like, oh yeah, it's like my last record ended on a song Connect that's all about technology. So it just feels like I try to have continuity between my records and stuff. Like I see myself as almost like a filmmaker in the way that I make my records. Even if I don't make the beats myself, I feel like I have an executive producer type role, and it's like I'm directing a film.
Right.
And even between my albums, I want there to be like a conversation, and it's my world and it's my language, and I want it to be like, when you see a Kubrick movie, right, and off top, like, it's like, okay, it's shot this way, and it has this kind of pacing. That's him. Like, no one could mistake my music for anybody else.
How would you describe that signature? Like that signature you're describing, where it's like people tune in and like, okay, that's Kubrick. What's the Cadence Weapon signature?
I think it's probably like the rawness of the synth. Synth is something that's been consistent on all my records. I was doing it when it wasn't normal and nobody else was really into it, especially the kind of like the heavy industrial kind of rap sound. Like there wasn't anything else like that. And now it's becoming a lot more normal and more conventional. But that's something that I think is a consistent thing throughout my career that I've always had.
And you mentioned, so you're in album mode right now, as in you're already moving on to you dropped this album, you're already on to the next one?
No. It's like I was in album mode, and it's like my album's out now, and now it's like more touring mode, and I'm promoting the album. But I always know what like my next thing is gonna be, and I already have a plan, and it's gonna be a collaboration album.
Dope.
Right, and I don't want to say who it is, but it's gonna be crazy. Like it's gonna be. I think it's like Watch the Throne of Canada.
Wow.
And it's coming. We're gonna work on it this summer, and I think it's gonna be extremely satisfying for Canadian rap fans, because it's like something that I think people have wanted to happen for a while.
Can you just say, is it you and another rapper?
It's me and another rapper.
Okay.
Yeah, and
nice.
I've wanted to do a record like that for a long time, and I think it's going to be really interesting, almost surprising who it is, and I'm just excited. I think it'll all be one producer too, hopefully. Like that's the vision. But yeah, it's it's very early, but it's
dude. I'm excited. Now people got to hear that first here, right?
Yes, that's the first time I talked about it yet.
Dope, man. It's super hyped to get that. I did want to ask you, aside from music, like you also do poetry. You used to be former poet laureate. You're an author.
Yeah.
Is that something that you like when you take on these projects? Do you just tap into them as like a one-off? You're like, I'm gonna write this one book one time, and then you move on to something else. Like you fulfilled that dream, and now you can say I'm an author now. Or do you want to continue to write? Like, how do you approach all the different ventures you take on? Oh, yeah.
I'm writing another book.
Amazing.
It's called Ways of Listening. It's going to come out next year. And it's a book of essays about music, but specifically about how we listen to music today in the streaming era. And me making some suggestions of how you can have a deeper listening experience and a more intimate relationship with the music you listen to. Because I feel like we're losing that a little bit. We're in this era of people, especially young people, thinking about music being just this, just background music for creating content, right? And for me, it's like a sacred art,
right?
And I just want to get people thinking about like actually sitting down and just listening to an album, just like from front to back, and just really being a little bit more mindful about what they listen to, I guess.
And how
they listen to it. And right. I'm going to draw from my experiences. Like I used to work at a record store back in the day. I learned a lot from that experience. Just all aspects of everything I've done around music have informed the way that I like to listen to music. So I'm going to be talking about that on the record.
I think we're of the same era, so I'm also an album guy, but I'm also trying to see how I can get my younger peeps to start taking in albums. But I just find that it's not within their nature to sit there and only, like in our generation, we used to put on headphones and that was the activity. We listened to music. they don't. They're listening to music while they're simultaneously doing something else, right? So that I don't think that the music necessarily gets that level of appreciation that it used to.
And I think it should. That's the thing.
Yeah, I think it should.
I think it's one of the most disrespected art forms out there because it's now been totally devalued by the streaming companies and all tech companies and stuff. And then we only appreciate it when it's not there. And I just hate the idea of like if they just like shut off Spotify tomorrow and people are gonna be like, damn, I have no music. Like I don't like that kind of centralization of music.
Yeah,
really.
I love talking to artists like yourself that don't necessarily try to follow like the path that all the other artists follow. Part of that being independent versus signing to a major record label. All of that. Has that ever even been a dream for you to try to sign to a major record label?
Never like really like a major, but I've always been a fan of like the really big indie labels in the world. Like I love XL. That's like a dream label, like Warp Records, those kind of places that have a really good balance of artistry, but then they have like a big audience. They're cool.
Do you think that your style of music could ever go pop, like become pop culture?
Yeah, I think so. Because the funny thing about pop culture is it takes time for certain things to shift into the mainstream. Like think about jazz, for instance, like hard bop. It used to be music where it was just a bunch of people doing drugs in a dank club, and it was scary. And then that same music 50 years later plays in the dentist's office.
Right.
Right? It's the exact same music.
That's a trip, but you're right. Yeah.
Right? And that's like what I think is the inevitable path of a lot of music. And it's already feels like what's happened to me, because I think when I first came on the scene, I felt like I was a total outsider artist that was just, I had nothing to do with mainstream. I was directly opposed to the mainstream. Whereas now I feel like I listen to so much music that feels like it's speaking my language, then people have a better understanding. They're like, oh yeah, he's like Canada's Kid Cudi or whatever, right? Like
right.
There's a bit of a vocabulary for what I'm doing now when there wasn't before.
So here's the thing though, because we even looked at it in terms of years. You're like, I'll do something and maybe around 5 years later, other artists will start to, mimic or catch on and do the same thing, right?
Yeah.
So if you're always ahead, how could you ever be pop culture if you're always too ahead?
Yeah, I mean, I think now the speed is faster though.
That's true.
Especially with like TikTok and just the distribution of things is so much faster that something that is underground 1 minute can immediately become like the most popular thing. So and the other thing though is like I don't really care about that much. Like
right.
like going pop or like being like a mainstream artist doesn't really interest me. I think the only thing I care about is as many people hearing my music as possible and getting the message out to as many people and people resonating with it. And it's like it's the same way like I play the same show for 3 people that I play for 3,000 people. Right? Like I'm going off and I'm going to try and give everyone the best experience of their life.
Right. So
that's how I roll with my audience that I have now versus like, in the future.
Are you still planning on, with this album, as I'm assuming you're going to go on tours, you're going to hit festivals, are you still, going to give it, as you get older, I'm asking, right?
Yeah, for sure.
You're a dad now. How do you stay in shape and how do you prepare for, going to perform a new album?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm playing some shows this week. Like I'm going to Montreal tomorrow, playing Quebec City, Montreal. I'm playing in Brooklyn at Elsewhere. And I'm doing a show in Washington, D.C. And then I'm probably going to do some West Coast dates in the fall. And I got playing Osheaga this summer.
Yeah.
So I definitely got some stuff popping.
You got a lot coming up. How are your knees feeling? You know?
Not great. Ever since I had a kid, it's really weighing on me. My child is quite heavy.
Right.
So it's like carrying like a kettlebell around everywhere I go.
That's the thing, man. I'm 38 now, and I think back to like when I was younger. I'm like, I used to just be up doing everything, and now I'm like, oh, my knee hurts, and like, just it's different now.
Yeah, I'm the same age.
Yeah.
So it's like I feel that. I feel you.
Yeah.
But it's like I don't know. It's like I feel like the same on the inside.
Exactly. I feel the same too.
I still feel the same kind of excitement about art, and like I just feel like that same person.
Yeah.
But it's just physically, I have ravaged my body.
I hear you, man. I think it's also, staying young in your mind. Like I dress the way I feel. I like colors.
Totally.
Speaking of dressing, I know you're all up in the vintage.
Yes.
You have a new vintage project, right?
I do, yeah.
Is that a store, like a vintage store?
Yeah, it's
What
like
is it?
it's pop-up events that I've been doing. Like I actually did one this past weekend in Hamilton at the Cotton Factory. It was a part of like a big market. But yeah, it's called Searcher Vintage. It's on Instagram, and it's basically, I started off with I was just looking for stuff for myself, and then it kind of went crazy where I was like, I'm finding so much cool stuff. Like I know I could do this vintage thing myself, and it's been pretty successful actually. It's
That's
like
awesome, man.
It's definitely a passion project. Like it's not really totally about making money.
Yeah.
But it's been doing really well, and I think I have a bit of an eye for it, and it's like everything I'm wearing is vintage.
Amazing. So you find the pieces and then you curate them for your pop-up. Is that right?
Yes.
Amazing.
And it's like I've been even going to like rag houses and stuff, and like that's like the real place where you can source crazy stuff. And it's like a conveyor belt of clothes that you go through, and like I found crazy stuff. Like I just found like a polo scarf, silk scarf. It's worth like $600 or something.
Wow.
And I just found it in there,
It's wild. I just recently came across this clip that was just floating on on the algorithm. It fed it to me. But it was this clip of Virgil, and somebody asks him, where do you think streetwear is going to be in the next 10 years? And he's like, oh, in the next 10 years. He's like, I don't know if it's going to survive. He's like, because, how many T-shirts do you really need? Mm-hmm. He's like, how many pairs of jeans and, do you really need? He's like, really what I think is going to happen is people are going to turn to vintage and thrifting. That was Virgil's prediction.
He was right.
Right. We've seen that happen. This is a thrift piece. I feel like thrifting is just, it's become a part of like our normal culture. Everybody that I know has at least a few vintage pieces, and it's not like they're cheap.
No.
People are willing to pay a good price for something that's vintage.
I think part of it too is, and I think Virgil would have known back then what it costs to produce things new. And I think it's just really, we've kind of reached a saturation point of how much stuff that is mass produced that people really want to buy. It's just, we're just clogging up the oceans. We're destroying the planet with the processing of all this clothes.
That's right, man.
I think the vintage thing, it just appeals to especially young people, especially when you want to have something that's unique.
Yeah,
it's a better material. It's not Shein or whatever. Like it's like a real thing. Because
it was just made. It was just structured better back when things were made before, right? Like they last longer.
It was built to last a bit.
Yeah.
Even not that long ago, like this jacket is a vintage Gap from like the year 2000.
Right.
And I couldn't imagine going anywhere today and buying a jacket that was like this thick and sturdy and like well built at like the mall.
Right.
And that was only, like 25 years ago.
How important is, aside from it being thrift and vintage, but how important is your style to your overall aesthetic and how that ties into your artistry?
It's cool. It's become very important to me. I feel like it's a way that I really like to express myself now, and it brings me a lot of joy. Like getting the drip going. It wasn't something I was interested in when I first started though. Like I was like, I didn't care what I looked like or what I wore or whatever.
Right.
I was always like really wild as a child.
What's the most that you splurged on for an item, an article of clothing, a jacket, some shoes? What's your favorite piece that you're like, I know it was expensive, but I had to get it?
Yeah, there's one, this vintage Prodigy, like the Prodigy, the UK group.
Okay.
It was like a purple tie-dye fire starter shirt that I bought in LA. And it was like way too much money, but it's like just an amazing shirt.
I feel you.
Even just from archival purposes, it was worth it.
LA has some good thrifting, man.
Some of the best.
The Rose Bowl Garden or whatever. Have you been there?
I've
Dude,
been.
they have some good thrifting. Like,
it's crazy.
you can spend all day there.
Yeah, I've done some crazy things there too.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I got this. You can find real vintage stuff there, which is cool. Like it's like true vintage.
Do you? I want to go back to music quickly, and I just wanted to ask you, for someone like yourself, you've always been a champion of Canadian music, which I think is really dope. A lot of artists, especially rappers, they don't necessarily like talk about or rap about Canadian things.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas I feel like you do.
Yeah.
Why do you choose to do that?
Yeah, I think the question for me is really like, why don't they? And I feel like there's this complex, and it's not just rap, it's a Canadian thing in general with our own artists. We don't appreciate ourselves, and we don't like our stuff as much as the American stuff, and we feel like we're inferior. And I think that extends to being like, we don't want to appear to be Canadian. We don't want to seem too Canadian. We don't want to be like, because it's like you couldn't make it in the States or something. Like like I intentionally want to be in Canada.
Yeah.
And I believe there's a lot of amazing art that comes from here that deserves to be highlighted. And it's just like, my nature is like, I like to share, like if I have the spotlight, if I have an audience, or if I'm like in front of the camera or whatever, like I like to bring people with me. I'm not a ladder puller. There's a lot of people in the industry, they're ladder pullers. You ever heard that before?
No.
It's like when somebody who climbs up to a certain level and they take the fucking ladder so nobody else can go. You know?
Right.
And I never understood that mentality, because it's like the people that you help and mentor and support are the people who keep your legacy alive.
Right.
Like, you ever hear like when Mac Miller died, everybody was like, yo, this guy, he let me sleep on his couch. He did this, he did that. He always was good to me, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
It's like, why wouldn't you want to help people? Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I think we have a really good music culture here.
Yeah,
and it deserves to be highlighted a bit more.
I agree. What do you think is missing from just the infrastructure? I think as a whole, that's maybe something that we could work on. You look at the U.S., and obviously their star system is just different. The way it's set up, they have Hollywood. They have, they just have different kinds of accolades, different things to kind of celebrate their artists. What do you think Canada needs to do to kind of propel that and make it grow and build more infrastructure here?
Yeah, I think it's a shame we don't really have the same infrastructure even as somewhere like England, which they have the strongest, to me, music culture in the world. Like, it's amazing. You put on the radio, it's like someone live mixing, DJing, playing electronic music, and it's just on regular radio.
Right.
And I couldn't ever imagine turning on CBC and hearing something like that. Or they'll have people like rapping in the studio over the mic, like over the radio in the middle of the night or whatever, and it's just this like vital, exciting thing, and there's context for it because they had pirate radio before and stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas here, why don't we have that? There's always this argument anytime I talk to CBC, I've talked about like having like a show or something, or like doing things, and it's always like, how are you going to relate to the 80-year-old woman in Miramichi?
Yeah, I've had that same discussion with CBC.
Right? And
I've pitched them hip-hop shows, and it just... Dude, I've been pitching them... I come from college radio. That's how I met Strombo. I used to do Off the Tracks radio, CKLN. And my next step was like, okay, I've been doing college radio for a while. How do I take this to CBC?
Yeah.
Just never happened.
Well, I was gonna say, it's like you should have your own show. You literally should have a show on CBC, and that's like you interviewing people, and it's like a hip hop thing, and it's cool. Cause like, why not?
We'll make it happen.
Literally, no. We got to make it happen, man.
We got to make it. CBC does need a show like that. I'm glad that now they have the block, right? But prior to that, which I think the block maybe launched 2-3 years ago. Yeah. Prior to that, there was nothing.
There was nothing. Yeah.
You know,
no, it's we're always a bit behind.
Yeah.
Other countries when it comes to that stuff. Like, it's still like people don't even. It's like we have two different Canadas.
Yeah.
And it's the Canada that the media represents, and then the Canada that we actually live in. And I feel like if you were to just go to a club, it's like, yeah, we know all the Drake, we know all the Canadian rap, like we know the music that we listen to on the street. But then if you listen to the radio, it isn't played.
Yeah.
And it's this cognitive dissonance that makes young people not want to listen to the radio and not care about what these old entities are doing. So I don't know. I think if they would like to survive, they should bring in more people like you and me, and open themselves up to the opportunities and potential that's out there.
I agree. I also think there's just a lack of even opportunity. Like if you look at the Junos, for instance. Like, you've never been nominated for a Juno?
I've never been nominated for a Juno.
See, to me, I'm like, how has this guy not been? You won the Polaris Music Prize,
yeah,
right? But you haven't been even nominated. I'm not saying won a Juno. You haven't even been nominated.
I never
for
did.
A Juno.
No.
So what's up with that? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's that's something that I would like to achieve. I'd like to be nominated, but it's also like, I don't know. It's I feel like part of it is I'm from Edmonton. And maybe it's like people have this preconceived notion about like what my music is like, and don't really see it as being rap or something. Like I've had that happen before. Like you listen to this record, there's a lot of electronic music in it too. Like I might have to go the Buck 65 route and go for alternative or something instead of rap. We'll see. So
maybe So you're saying it's maybe what you're submitting for. Like the way that the categories are.
Well, because the rap, it's like you look at the rap and they'll nominate somebody who has like a 3-song EP and some artists I never heard of before, but they're on like Universal, and that's how they got in or whatever.
That's interesting.
And then they'll nominate that instead of like me. I mean, there's a lot of politics with it, and I can't really control it. All I can do is try and make the best thing I make and just put myself out there and hope that it's appreciated. But I'm just an artist, man. Like that's the thing. I'm an artist first and foremost, and I just focus on the art, and I just try and make things that satisfy the muse. And if there's any kind of recognition that comes from that, that's cool. But if it, there's a funny thing about that recognition is that I'm the kind of artist that ends up being like the artist that I used to listen to when I was growing up. And they didn't get their recognition in their lifetime a lot of the time. And probably the same thing will happen to me. And that's okay. Because I got to live my life, and I never compromised. And I pushed things a little bit left for everybody.
That's interesting. Because you're right. I think in our era, a lot of the artists that we looked up to didn't necessarily get the accolades, specifically accolades, let's call it, that an artist today would get that's maybe doing the same thing that they did at that time. That's very interesting, man.
But time is an interesting thing. What is strange to you today will be commonplace in 5 years.
So here's the interesting thing too. I work with a lot of Latin artists. I'm Latino. I work with a lot of Latin artists in Toronto, and the interesting thing is that with the rise of even reggaeton and Bad Bunny and all these artists,
I love that shit. I love it,
right, bro? I want to hear you do something on that style of.
I would love to.
Right,
that's some of the best production right now.
Fire, bro,
by far.
But the thing is, so like even a lot of these artists are like, how do I get my music to the Junos. Where can I get my music played? They're just, even for Canada, there isn't a way to even support these artists, right? And if you look at French artists, they don't really get play in Ontario. They get lots of play in Montreal. It's like, it's still very like divided, and there isn't a cross nation platform that just supports all artistry or all music in general. So I think in terms of infrastructure, that's probably something we need to build towards.
Definitely, man. I think we're still it's still embryonic. Like, it's not as established as it should be. Yeah, and there's still a lot that needs to be done.
Yeah. Okay. We're gonna end on a positive note. I know you're a big hooper. You like basketball.
Yes.
I've been asking a lot of people this. I get lots of different responses, but it usually comes down to two.
Okay.
But who would you say is the best Toronto Raptor of all time?
Ooh, wow. That's an amazing question. Okay, so for me, my mind automatically goes to Kyle Lowry. He really changed a lot about the way the team was perceived. And he really, to me, is like the foundation of how we won the championship.
Right.
The heart of the team, truly. And it's just that kind of like workman-like mentality. He's the kind of guy who, like, when they won the championship, he caught the ball before it went into the crowd or got lost, and he made sure,
right,
that he had it. Like, it's that kind of attention to detail. So, like, for me, he's got to be, and we call him the GROAT, right? Greatest Raptor of all time. He's got to be. But I think my other one would probably have to be Kawhi, just on sheer impact. Like, I know he wasn't here for that long,
right?
But it's like we've never had a better player in their prime than him, I would say.
That was able to carry us to the victory. Right?
Like, you can't win a championship without a guy like that.
Yeah.
And we had that guy for 1 year.
Yeah.
And it changed all of our lives.
It's interesting. The answers that I always get, and it's usually split, but generally leans towards Kyle Lowry and Vince Carter.
Sure.
Those are the two that I always get. Kyle Lowry, for me personally, I had a chance to get to know him. I sat down like this. We did like
Wicked.
a 2-hour conversation. And just getting to know him and his humility, for me, I was like, this dude's a gem. This guy is incredible. Vince, I've never got a chance to meet him, but just for what he did for the city,
Sure.
I could see the impact that he left on the city.
Like, that's a good answer, Vince, obviously.
Yeah.
I'm just still of the mind, like, he didn't, like, win a lot when he was here. Which is not always all about winning. Like, we might not even have a team still if we didn't draft him.
Right.
We could have been like
when he was
Vancouver.
around, we were kids, so we're the same age. So
yeah.
So we were kids. What was it like in Edmonton growing up when the Raptors franchise came? Obviously, you being in Canada, it was still Canada's team, but you were in Edmonton. Right?
Well, it wasn't even really for us because we were more Vancouver Grizzlies. Because they were closer.
Right.
Right. So we were riding hard for the Grizzlies at that time. Big country.
And then
that kind of shit.
Wow, I totally forgot about that. Yeah.
I was rocking with the Raptors too. I went to a game in Edmonton that was like an exhibition, but against the Raptors versus the Grizzlies, and Master P played.
Right.
He was on the Raptors at that
that's
time.
right. I remember that.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah, it's cool.
I've had somebody say he was the greatest Raptor of all time, which I found was hilarious.
He's the most interesting Raptor of all time. That's pretty cool.
That's amazing. Okay, last question we're going to end off on. I want to talk food with you.
Yeah, man.
What is the best, when you're in Toronto, in the city, what's the one place that you're like, I need to get this? Or, obviously you come to Toronto all the time too, so it's not like every time, but what's the one thing in Toronto that you would say, this is the best thing to eat in Toronto?
Well, I'll just say something that really impressed me was June Plum.
Okay, yeah.
The patties there, I think I had the oxtail patty.
Yeah.
And I was just like, they're like stepping up the game of patties in the city. Like, it's special stuff.
I love patties.
Yeah, it's like anytime, like my DJ JMKM, she does a lot of stuff with them, and she ends up getting like patties and like hooking me up, and I'm like, man, this is a biblical experience.
Yeah, shout out JMKM, she's really dope.
JM legend.
What about in Hamilton, man? Like, what's the food scene like out there?
You know what? I just had a viral video talking about the top 5 Hamilton subs.
No way.
There's like a big submarine sandwich culture there. Like, that's the thing, is like they don't really have Subway. It's all like independent places called Mike's Subs.
Right.
And it's like 20 of them.
So
yeah.
subs is what you got to try when you're in Hamilton.
You got to get a sub. You got to pull up Mike's Subs. You know, I recently had an amazing play, banh mi. So banh mi Hugh.
In Hamilton?
Yeah, it was like the best banh mi I've ever had in my life. It was so good.
Whoa,
the bread
dude.
was just like...
What's the spot called? Do you remember?
It's called Banh Mi Hue.
Banh Mi Hue.
Hue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bro, next time I'm out there.
It's crazy. It's insane.
And it goes without saying, I think Hamilton has all the beautiful waterfalls and stuff too, right?
Yeah, man. Like, I just did a video at one of the waterfalls.
Nice.
Yeah,
nice.
We've got some beautiful nature. You got to come to Hamilton. We got some beautiful waterfalls, some beautiful nature. Have a submarine sandwich. Enjoy the city.
There you have it. You heard it from Cadence Weapon himself. Raleigh, you gotta hit up Hamilton. Thank you, brother. I appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, likewise, bro.